Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Ike Krieger.
Hey, this is Ike Krieger. Welcome back. This is Ike Krieger, and welcome to the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. This episode contains a few segments which I think will be helpful for some of you if you're interested in taking on this easier way to sell. And in addition, I'm going to be talking about, or at least a little bit about, the supply chain that we keep hearing so much about. I understand the supply chain, but for the first time, I'm looking at the salesman's role, the salesperson's role in that supply chain and how you might be able to use it to grow your business, how you might be able to use the supply chain to understand your business even better. I will give you a link to a couple of articles and reports that I found during my research, and I will put them in the show notes so you can go and get them just by clicking on the link. And finally, I'm going to have a conversation with my new friend, my new good friend, Deigan, a little later in the episode. And I found it such a delightful conversation that I decided just to run it as it was recorded. So you're going to hear this in its raw form. And in that raw form, you're going to get a lot of good information. So once again, welcome, and let's get started. Drumroll, please. We're about to inaugurate a new segment on the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. I've decided to go through the action guide and do reviews of my own material. Some of this material is literally from the last century, and although every bit of coaching information I share with you is timely, I have a few updated thoughts that have occurred since the early episodes, and I think they'll be useful. You keep hearing me say you'll close more sales when you ditch your pitch, and what experience tells me is that when you're asked to ditch your pitch, it probably troubles you. You might be open to ditching your pitch if you had something with which to replace it, but you might not want to ditch your pitch. You might believe your presentation or your demonstration has become your key to your sales success, and I'm asking you to throw away the key. Well, the very first page of the Close the Deal Without Selling action guide is called Ditch Your Pitch, and the title ends with a question mark. That question mark will never be erased in your mind unless and until you come to the conclusion on your own that for you to close more transactions more easily and more often, you must stop giving your traditional sales presentation or traditional demonstration. Let me explain. The first question that you're asked on the first page of the action guide is, what's more difficult? Number one, getting someone to do something you want them to do, or number two, getting someone to do something they want to do? Well, I cast my vote on getting people to do something that you want them to do. And it's the same in sales, at least traditional sales. You want people to buy something from you, and you want them to buy because you want them to buy it, or you might actually need them to buy it. Why? Because you have to sell to live. Whatever your motivation, you may not want to ditch your pitch. You may be one of those salespeople who believes that convincing, influencing, and educating people will cause them to buy from you. The problem is, you use the process of convincing and influencing and educating on people who are never going to buy from you. I repeat, people who are never going to buy from you. Plus, an additional problem springs up with the old-fashioned approach. I believe the Achilles heel of salespeople is giving away valuable information for free. Prospects use this information to solve their own problem, or they use that information to rain terror on other suppliers, or even worse, your competitors. Before I go any further, I need to clarify something. When I tell you to never, educate your prospects? I'm serious. It's perfectly all right to educate your clients. They're paying you for that information and counsel. Prospects, on the other hand, are looking for someone to help them resolve their issue. Giving them information for free makes you look smart, but in nearly 4 decades, I've found that it doesn't help you close the deal. Remember, educate your clients, not your prospects. Also, when you're giving information, when you're talking, when you're convincing, when you're educating, you are not listening. And that leads us right into the big deal about ditching your pitch. Now, we've been talking about this big deal over the last couple of episodes, and I asked this question. Who are you being when you walk into your prospect meeting? The coaching of this system is that you move from being a salesperson and become a problem solver. When you sell, you're focused on selling what you're selling. When you're a problem solver, you never sell until you're convinced that the prospect has the issue your product will resolve. And of course, you'll never know until you ask. And this is where all the open-ended questions that you use in this system come into play. These diagnostic questions help you uncover the problem of your prospect and whether or not it's a problem you solve. And as a bonus, the responses to your questions will help you quickly decide whether or not this person is a viable recipient for your offering. This is where the process of uncovering a no that was going to happen anyway shines its light. Now, the easier way to sell uses the yes formula to qualify or disqualify a prospect as soon as possible. This system is designed to uncover a no that was going to happen anyway. And if a no is going to happen anyway, when would you rather hear that no, earlier or later in the sales process? Your diagnostic questions will help you decide whether or not the prospect is truly a candidate for your problem-solving abilities. When you ditch your pitch, you'll get to stop all the convincing and all the talking by shifting away from being a giver of information to that of a receiver of information. Your goal with this system is to talk less and sell more. Now, don't get me wrong, the traditional way to sell works when it works. However, a lot of salespeople end up sacrificing a fragment of their sanity to the old numbers game. Most traditional selling strategies produce sales results that are random and inconsistent. Example, you close a sale in the morning, and in the afternoon you give the same identical, powerful presentation to someone equally as qualified, and you don't get the sale. This system, the easier way to sell, relies on a process that helps people buy from you because they want to buy from you. This system works because it's a product of a different communications mindset. When you started out in sales, you were probably taught to give a presentation to anyone with a pulse. You also heard along the way that the number one fear of most people is speaking in public. Well, your sales presentation is nothing more than you speaking in public. Your presentation may be in private, but you still have to communicate with someone else. In addition, you have to fulfill on your intention of conducting some type of transaction or human interaction. And this is where you've relied on your presentation or your demonstration. This interaction, this public speaking, results in the stress and frustration that comes with expending great effort. With the easier way to sell, you get to avoid this interaction altogether. Plus, you'll avoid having to spend a lot of time doing a dog and pony show for your prospects who may not even be prospects. In the sales world, these types of might be but not really prospects are known as suspects. And suspects have no need for your offering, but you don't know that for sure. So you believe or you've been trained that your job is to get them to buy. You hope that your prepared sales presentation will make that happen. And when it doesn't work, it is frustrating. Behold, the birth of sales stress. This stress is usually accompanied by the question, what can I do to close more sales? Clearly, my coaching is use the easier way to sell and you'll close more sales. Think about this. You'll ditch your pitch, and then the yes formula will guide you on what you communicate and how you communicate. And this new communication will fill the void formerly occupied by your presentation. This shift in how you communicate will help you create a safe, friendly, stress-free conversation in which sales actually close themselves. You'll learn to love these sales conversations. Just imagine your prospect willingly assuming the responsibility of telling you, of convincing and influencing you that they have a need for and want your product or your service. As backwards as that seems, it really works. Talk about an easier way to sell. We just started to integrate video into the podcast, and I'm inviting you to go to our channel on YouTube, Close the Deal Without Selling, and subscribe. For the first time, you'll get to see my entire conversation that I'm going to be having with Dan Deigan in full living color, and I think it adds a different dimension to the conversation. So, once again, I invite you, go to the Close the Deal Without Selling channel on YouTube and subscribe. I'm reluctant to share any information about any subjects on which I really don't consider myself that knowledgeable. And one of those subjects is the supply chain. And I've been racking my brain after hearing about supply chain, how it's broken, how it needs to be fixed, how salespeople fit into the supply chain. I wish I had a really detailed, exact answer, but I was thinking that if you indeed are in a chain, you are part of, you'll excuse the expression, a linkage that needs to be maintained in order for your product or your service or your supplier or your customers to be satisfied on a normal continuum. The question is, how do you personally fit into the supply chain? And what I've done is I did some research and I found a couple of articles. One is, I believe, either a master's or a doctoral thesis about the role of the salesperson, both in the wholesale side of the supply chain and on the retail side of the supply chain. And I'm going to read you a little bit, but then I'm going to invite you to go and look at these reports, which I will make available through a link in our show notes. So if you have a chance, go read them and see how you might be able to position yourself in such a way that you can be even more effective for your clients, your prospects, for your suppliers, for your manufacturers, for your boss. How do you help cause your product to be moved from where it is to where it's supposed to be? The paper that I was referring to is called The Role of Wholesale Salespersons and Incentive Plans in Promoting Supply Chain Performance by Wallace J. Hopp from the Stephen M. Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Talk about equal opportunity. Here's a guy from The Ohio State University promoting something from somebody at Michigan. Good on ya, Ike. All I would like you to do is just think about how you fit into what we've now certainly come to know as the supply chain. A wholesale salesperson differs from a traditional retail salesperson by playing an intermediary role in allocating inventory within a supply chain. Although the wholesale salesperson is paid by the manufacturer, her performance is influenced by the decisions of both the manufacturer and the retailer. In contrast, a retail salesperson is paid by the retailer, and her performance is only directly influenced by the retailer. In a vehicle supply chain, for instance, a retail salesperson works for a dealership and sells directly to customers, while a wholesale salesperson works for the manufacturer and sells to the dealerships, but may also help promote retail demand. Now, that's on page 14 of the report, and that's all I'm going to read to you to clarify the difference between retail sales and wholesale sales, and you know which one you're in. Now, the question is what can you do to grease the wheels of that supply chain, make it better for the people that are on either side of you in the supply chain? What is it that you can invent that will help you be more effective as a problem solver? That's what this is all about. Remember, the links are in your show notes. Let me tell you a little bit about the upcoming conversation. I'll be talking with Dan Deigan, and Dan is in a very interesting segment of the sales and business world. He's in transportation and logistics. In other words, getting things from where they are to where they're supposed to be and making sure that they do that on time. Dan has been in this business since 1994, and he's accumulated a wealth of knowledge that he's willing to share with you, and he does so on his HPLS podcast. And I've been fortunate enough to be a guest on that podcast, and I invite you to listen. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and however you're going to do it, let's give a warm welcome to Dan Deigan. You're in for a treat now. I'm talking with basically a new friend, Dan Deigan, who I met via networking on LinkedIn. And I find that Dan's approach to sales and selling really fits into what we've been talking about throughout all of our time together. So I'm delighted to have Dan Deigan here all the way from Ontario, Canada. We just brought him to Southern California magically. So I want to, hey, welcome, Dan. Thank you for being on the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast.
Thanks, Ike. I really appreciate it. I kind of wish I was in Southern California, not digitally, but personally. I've had some friends. I have some friends in Southern Cal and all across California, and there's been many conversations had in wintertime about how nice California would be.
Well,
so I appreciate you having me, my friend.
I get that. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, so until I was 30, I was able to, really be tough and go, all right, well, I'll handle it. And then I realized I couldn't handle it anymore. And at 30 years old, I came to California, which had been a lifelong dream. So, but on the flip side of that, I'm still cold. So,
I understand it. For me, it's about priorities, right? In everything. So winter was great when I had a snowmobiling priority, and I love snowmobiling. And now what's kind of evolved over or transitioned, I guess, Mother Nature's transitioned over the last couple of years is snowmobiling season went from, 10, 12 weeks to 8 to 6 to 4.
Yeah.
And then not only that, I'm in I wouldn't say majorly northern part of Ontario, but I'm about an hour and a half north of Toronto, the main city. And we used to be in the snow belt. So it was great. I'd hop on my sled right from my driveway and I could pretty much go across Canada if I wanted. And probably out of the last 4 or 5 years, we've had trails open one where I didn't actually have to get in a truck, load my sleds on a trailer and go somewhere. Wow. So for me, now that priority of snowmobiling's gone, no, I'm ready for summer all year round, brother.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned you had your snowmobiling and your sledding as your memory of what it was like during the good times. And when I think back to my good times in the winter, it's when my father used to carry me to the car.
Yep.
To stay out of the snow, keep those feet dry. I have what I believe to be a powerful question, and I'm expecting a powerful answer from you regarding
you're setting up a lot here.
I am setting up a lot. What's the worst piece of sales advice you've ever received?
Make more calls, you make more money.
Tell me more.
So when I first started in sales, I'm 27 years in the business now, and people started saying, no, you don't have to. Actually, let me rephrase that. one of my first quote unquote and big quotation marks. I didn't even ask if this was going to be video or audio. So, you know, if you can't see me and we're on audio, I'm doing massive quotation marks here. If you just did see me on video, you probably think I'm crazy. So when I first started in transportation and logistics, I had somebody drop what was called a Rand McNally guide. And it's pretty much just a list of manufacturers in a certain area. Dropped it on my desk and he said, listen, you need to make 400 calls a day and you'll get customers. And you'll be so successful if you make 400 calls a day. And not adding context to that was the worst advice ever. Because if you make 400 calls a day, but you don't understand your customer profile, you don't understand what your value prop is, you don't understand what you can do or how you can help, or you don't even understand how to ask the questions to get into the meat and potatoes of what you can actually do for a customer, you're making 400 calls a day. Almost, it's like walking into a war zone blind and just spraying everywhere. You might hit the odd one. You know, I often refer to it as even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then.
Yes.
Right. And it was the worst sales advice. But at that point, I was 16 years old. I still smelled like pee, as the owner of the company used to say. I wasn't allowed to go out on sales calls or anything. I was literally just a phone guy.
Just fresh out of diapers, huh?
Pretty much. I mean, that's what it was. And, you know, and it was, at that time, I thought, oh, well, that's the best advice ever. I mean, I'd come into work at 6 a.m. I'd start practicing my phone calls 2 hours east of me, which would be like Prince Edward Island. And then as it hit 7 a.m., I'd hit, you know, the New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, which was an hour ahead of me. And I would stay till 7 or 8 at night and call your area in California. And, you know, after about 6-7 months, don't get me wrong, I skyrocketed in sales, but it came to a plateau. And that plateau for 3 years, I just made more calls, because I thought the formula was more calls. And in my 4th year in business, I realized this is stupid. Like, I'm working 16 hours a day making calls, and I was getting customers, but just as fast as I'd get them, I'd lose them. Because I realized that, you know, we're not seeing eye to eye. He's all about price. I'm all about the value I bring to the table. They're all about service, and I'm thinking about price. So I was offering customers A when they were looking for B. You know, I often refer to it as I use a putter mentality. I'm a big golfer. Are you a golfer, right?
I do golf. I would not say that now. I'm not in your
diehard?
League. Whatever league you're in, I'm not in it.
Okay, so I'm a diehard. I love golf. I mean, there was a point where I was playing 164 rounds a year. I mean, I'm talking 2 rounds on Saturday, 2 rounds on Sunday, and playing 3-4 times a week. If you offered me a putter that would drop 6 to 8 strokes off my game, I'd gladly pay you $5,000-$10,000 for that putter. I wouldn't bat an eyelash. I have friends that have stereo systems worth $10,000. That makes my sphincter tighten up like you wouldn't believe, because to me, I can get, you know, these aren't earbuds. They're $30 from Amazon, and they play music fine for me.
Just fine, yeah.
But my friend would say, this is the most disgusting thing you can ever spend your money on. So what's value to you does not necessarily mean it's value to me. And, you know, without understanding that context and just operating under the perspective of, you know, you make more phone calls, you're going to be successful. It's not true. You're going to reach a, you know, level of success, I guess. I don't even know if I'd call that success. You're going to reach a level of achievement. But it's going to be nowhere where any salesperson really wants to be. So I hope that was a really roundabout way to answer your question.
It was a very good roundabout way that's saying playing the numbers game really works, and there's ways to boost your effectiveness while going through the numbers game. But on the bell curve, you know, there's 20% that are going to say yes if you look at them cross-eyed and say, you don't want this, they're going to go, yes, I do, because those people were out there just waiting for someone to come and say, I've got what you need. And you wonder why that doesn't work with people further up the ladder who don't have that same motivation. And so what did you learn after cold calling for as long as you did that helped you shift into a different gear?
Oh, great question. I learned to qualify in under a minute. I spent probably 90% of my focus, my training after hours, my training during the day, on qualifying. How do I qualify a prospect as soon as possible? Right. So a couple of things that came with qualifying is because I realized that I probably need to ask better questions. I need to, and when I ask better questions, I better be, the flip side of that is asking better questions is great, but are you ready for the answers? So like, it was funny because when I took that one step forward into becoming a pro, right? Because I mean, let's look at it. We got the reality of sales is you have the amateurs and you have the pros, right? It's like in every field, right? Every parent think their kid's going to the big show when they put them in sports. And then we soon realize that it's not likely for the most people going to happen. Some parents still haven't realized that, but that's another podcast.
What are you trying to say? No, not.
Yeah, I know. It's so, when I realized that, yes, I could achieve some success by just making more calls, because eventually you'll stumble on the person, like you said, that's either had the issue right away with his product or service, and you just happen to be the competitor, and you're going to hit those people. That's for sure. But having no context into why they buy, who is it that you really want to deal with? I mean, we sit here and, right now we're in the middle of our work day, and we have the privilege of getting to know each other on the back end and saying, yes, we really want to do this. I had you on my podcast. You're having me on your podcast. But how much effort or energy do we put into really understanding who we want to work with for 8 to 10 hours a day, right? The majority of our life, especially, today's day and age, because of technology and we're always connected, is spent working. So I really started to look at it and I said, well, you know what I really want to do? I want to enjoy what I'm doing. I want to work with people that want to work with me. I want to work with people that have a like mind, that are positive, that aren't just complaining about every little thing around. I mean, if I'm going to go out for lunch with a customer, I want to go out for lunch with a customer. We're going to have a real intellectual conversation where we don't have to talk about work. We can talk about a million other things and really enjoy our time together and almost become friends. So I started looking at business in the same pod as I would, in essence, qualify a friend, right? We meet somebody, you and I met, we've had mutual conversations. We've had fantastic intellectual conversations about, we have a mutual sales, growth, education.
A love of sales.
A love, yes, a love, you're right. And so, it's obviously formed into a friendship, right? And it's just the beginning. But I realized very quickly that, those people that are not of my customer profile are not the people I want to deal with, chew up 85 to 90% of my time. And they give me 5 to 10% of my profit, my revenue that helps my family eat and me enjoy the things in life. And I looked at it and I said, this is crazy.
Yeah,
this
it is
math
crazy.
Formula does not work long term.
Well, one of the things that I preach in the system that I champion is that you've got enough problems with your non-problem clients that to take on a client that and it, that's going to be a problem is insanity. So your ability.
But you know why salespeople do it?
Because they're needy, because we're needy and we're trying to solve our problem rather than theirs. Oh, good, I've got another client. And how much did that prospect or client cost you in time and effort and money? So one of the things that I found, just to touch on your cold calling conversation, is that we talked about benefits and value propositions. My question to clients and to anyone on the phone is, what problem do you solve, and how available is that concept to language to your prospects? Like, rather than tell them, well, you might or might not need this, is, a lot of my clients have a hard time getting from A to B, and I'm curious how that's affecting you. And if they go, well, I don't have that issue at all, you don't have to qualify them anymore. You don't have to do that anymore because they've told you that they're not in your marketplace. And you trying to create a yes out of a real no takes up even more time. So it's pretty crazy. And, that's my 2 cents.
When I agree with you completely. I'm of the belief I choose my customers just as much as they choose me. And so many salespeople tell me, "Are you crazy, Dan? I just want clients." I said, "But why?" Like if you were just to have me start over today, and you were saying, "You know what, Dan? What would you do if you just had a phone and you had to start everything all over again from scratch?" I said, the first thing I would do is spend 95% of my time figuring out who I want to work with. I'd spend the other, and once that's figured out, I'd take 95% of my, this is before even making a phone call.
Sure.
I'd figure out who I want to work with, and I'd figure out the other 95% of my time is I'd figure out 3 very strategic landmark questions, if you will, where I would be able to ask up to 3 questions, and I'd be able to figure out if I want to work with you or not. Yeah. And you look at it in every aspect, right? So, and it's funny because some people say, well, you're kind of taking a page from a internet marketing perspective. And I guess I am, because the best courses online, the best people that make the most money are people that have people apply to their course. Now, the underlining kind of area there is really how many people don't pass the application process. That's the question, right? I can't answer that because I don't know, but I would tend to think very few don't pass.
Yeah,
if you're signing up for a $10,000 course, I mean, there's companies out there that want to make sure they bring in high performers because it's their brand.
I understand that, and I have my own take on the training world, especially the traditional training world, and its effectiveness or lack thereof, which is a whole other podcast. Yet everything you've told me now leads me up to another question that I know everyone is dying to know the answer to, and that's, what do you do?
Okay, so I guess we probably should have started with that.
No, now is fun because everybody can go, oh, I see.
Yes. So I've been for 27 years. I was in transportation and logistics. I was in third party. I was in asset based. Third party is, for lack of a better term, the middleman in transport. You call companies that manufacture products. They need help getting the trucks into their door and getting their freight delivered to customer. We become an extension of their business, deliver freight to their customer.
And you call that sales?
Yes. Yeah. I've been on the asset side. I've been on the warehouse side. I've been on the international side, dealing in overseas and all that kind of stuff. I've made it a point in my career to understand, and I wouldn't say be a jack of all trades, but I'm deadly in all areas. And then I work with teams and I align myself with experts in those areas. So I'm lethal enough to go in and have a very intellectual conversation on every mode of freight and logistics. And then I bring back and employ different people that are 100% focused on those areas. And
I'm taking care of that. So give me a quick example of company A has X that they need to go to city Y. Just if you could briefly walk me through the steps of how you go about getting them and where the sales part of what you do comes in.
You mean getting the client?
Yes. When you have somebody who has it, you go to them, and what is your conversation with them that has them go, Dan's the man?
Okay. So for starters, I don't necessarily sell on the first call ever.
Okay.
I've discovered, and I've got pretty much 3, again, landmark questions for me to qualify. So if I were to call you up, Ike, it'd be something along the lines of, what's your primary and secondary reason for adding or switching a service provider? I don't care what it is particularly, and don't get me wrong, I'm not selling you right now. I'm trying to find out if we're a match personally. And then what I do is it's funny that we're having this conversation today. So I keep a lot of these things on my desk. So if this is audio, for those of you that can't see, it's a objection rebuttal list. And I actually, every day when I make my sales calls, I just fill out a sheet just like this, and I just draw a line down the middle and I draw a line across the top. And every time I hear an objection, I create a rebuttal for it because I'm continually growing. So when I call a company up and I say, what's your primary reason for adding or switching a service provider? The typical answers are price, visibility, relationship, capacity, honesty, integrity, those types of things. And I'm talking on the freight end, right? So you're a manufacturer of widgets. you need those widgets to get to your customers in due time, because in today's day and age, it's instant gratification. Everybody wants it instantly. So especially if you're a B2C scenario, they want it even more. But a B2B needs to fulfill the B2C.
Sure.
So you see how the changes continues. So then you come back with something like price and visibility. So now my second landmark question is clarifying what your answers are. Because what price means to you is not necessarily what price means to me. And you see, and this is where I believe a lot of salespeople really get it wrong. It's like, okay, perfect. Well, I could get it to you cheaper. You have no idea. And not to mention, let's stop there for a second. When you sell price, you're not a salesperson. You're a transactional individual.
Not only that, you know the name they give to people who sell by what they say that people who sell by discounting are doing? It's a bit inelegant. It's called dropping your pants. And
yes. I was waiting to see where you were going.
No, that's exactly right. Where I was going. Yeah. It is not a flattering nor a very positive term, but when you walk in and go, yeah, let's not worry about price. Whatever you can get, I can get it lower. It's just not.
Well, not only that, you're setting yourself up for a real ebb and flow business, right? And this brings us back to our first question. The just making more calls, never investigating why companies really purchase, how they purchase, what are the benefits of them purchasing like that? Have they ever explored a different way to purchase? You're going in that ebb and flow transactional business.
And when I heard what you were saying, I was thinking to myself, again, I don't know your business, but if I were on the phone, I realize that you already have things in place to do X. And I was curious if there's one thing you would change or make different about what you're doing, what would that be? And what stopped you from doing that already?
Exactly. And that's inquiring, engaging the prospect in about what they're doing in their business, and it's getting them to think. Right? It's stopping the usual, hey, my name's Dan, I'm really good at what I do. My company's really, really awesome, because you don't care what my company does.
They don't care about
if I'm good at my business. No, you care about what it means to you, your bottom line, your business, your time. Especially now, like when we're recording this, we're, kind of in that 3/4 way mark with COVID and in the first, quote unquote, first wave, whatever they're talking about.
Crazy time.
Anyone really knows. But yeah, and I don't think anyone really knows what is going to happen in the future. If there is this, I think there's a lot of speculation. But, I look at this time, the biggest thing people are looking for right now is to get time back. And you look at sales managers, you look at corporations, you look at, public companies, you look at all these. How do we get investors more money in the last half of the year to make up for the first half of the year? So how do you do that? How do you make a dollar out of a dime? Right? Like these are the questions that are going to be posed to a lot of people, your following, my following, that we deal with. Is, we just wait for the pressure sales managers are going to put on their teams. Sorry, the uneducated sales managers going to put on their teams.
Well, we're going to qualify,
I had to qualify that. I apologize. The uneducated or the sales managers that don't understand, the psychology behind sales are going to start putting all this undue pressure on their sales team, when most of the time, if their sales teams are pros and dedicated individuals, the pressure's already on them.
Glenn Ross.
Feel it. You know what? Exactly. And it's going to become this boiler room mentality, in my opinion. Whereas, what if we were to stop for a second and look at the what ifs, right? And I know I put a post out, and I remember a while back you commented on, what if this is the most opportune time to level up, to skill up, to become a pro at your business? What if you were to spend, like Einstein, I think, Einstein said, if you asked me to chop down a tree, I'd spend 95% of the time sharpening the axe and 5% chopping it down. And that's, again, you see how this conversation's looping right back here.
Yeah.
95% of the time I now spend on qualifying that prospect to go to the next step, because I believe sales in every aspect is a next logical step process. Right. So once you qualify the customer, the next logical step is, okay, let's inquire to what they're doing, how they're doing, why they're doing it, and what benefits they see from it, and see if we can shift that thought process into, here's some much bigger benefits. Here's more time back. Here, like, we're not, whatever we do, if we go and buy a car, we're not buying a car. We're buying that feeling the car gives us. You know, for me, I bought my last car completely based on tech. I mean, only based on tech. I honestly didn't give a crap if the seat was comfortable. Tech. Can it allow me to send emails, receive texts, make phone calls, watch, be on video conferences while I'm driving? And I know
you
that
had specific
crazy.
Problems you needed solved, issues.
I had, exactly.
Well, one of the things that, and I don't know if we've gotten into detail, I believe that one of the big challenges when you get into sales conversations, be they first time or somewhere down the road, is that there are no rules that have been established in the sales conversation. And you, as a professional salesperson, have your guidelines, and I'll just say we as buyers sit here with our defenses against the sales boogeyman, because our first response usually is to, nah. So one of the things that the system that I developed deals with is setting up rules. Like in Monopoly, you know, you and I certainly know how to play Monopoly, but we couldn't play unless I found out what rules you played by when you were a kid and my rules, and we figured out, well, how much money does go into free parking. Then we could play. And in life, if you could get those rules established very quickly about, well, you know, you're not allowed to tell me I want to think about it. Because I want to think about it usually means what? And they go,
usually means you're not sold.
Yes. And if somebody says that, it's just a polite way of saying no. And then, you know, then the sales process begins. But what you were talking about is so right on, is being able to qualify. And the only thing that I would add on there is that if you can establish a set of rules by which everybody can play this sales game, you end up with much less of that stress and frustration about not quite knowing what's going to happen, because either they'll play by the rules or they won't. And if they don't, you can respectfully withdraw. Here's my next question. The supply chain. That's big talk right now. Supply chain, huge. Supply chain.
Huge.
First of all, where do you fit into the supply chain?
So so two levels. One being I've been an asset supplier. So meaning I actually own the trucks that would pick up at facilities.
Okay.
So your last, you know, consider it last mile, first mile, every mile. And I was also a broker. So I was considered the middleman.
Right.
So for example, when, you know, I don't want to, I know this podcast is more than just that, but I'll go back to COVID, right? When COVID kicked in, a few things happened in the supply chain. One, 30 to 60% of a lot of companies, drivers said, not a chance. I'm not going on the road. I'm not doing this. I have a family to look after. I'm staying home. So it tightened what we called capacity, meaning the amount of trucks on the road. Now, what happened is there was that restriction, and then companies started closing. So that restriction lifted because there's less people that needed freight moved on the road, right? So when you have malls close, big outlet stores like Winners, HomeSense, Nike, all these massive corporations that move a ton of freight, specifically from locations like China, Turkey, Istanbul, you know, all these, Cambodia,
So that's the supply chain, right? Where it goes from here to here to here to here. 100%. And you fit in your basically last mile to get it to either salespeople or consumers?
I'm an extension of the customers I work with to get their product to market, I guess. To market.
Okay. Yeah. So here's a thought I wanted your idea on, and that's if we had a group of our listeners sitting in a little conference at a round table, and our conversation was about how do you see your business, no matter what it is, fitting into the supply chain, and how might you make your business more profitable and more and increase your ability to be of service if you took a look at yourself from that? I mean, And I'm just spitballing this right now because you did ask a question not too long ago about how do you prepare yourself for the other side of what we're dealing with now. And I was wondering if a supply chain conversation going through a salesperson's head might help give them a different angle with which to approach their job.
Got it. So the first thing we do when it comes from a supply chain, so if you're a digital product software manufacturer, that kind of thing, where now it would all be done digitally, supply chain wouldn't necessarily come into play. Physical product supply chain obviously comes into play, right? Anyone that's anywhere listening or watching this, you do a 360, everything you see is touch to truck. It's just a reality. Like, you know, they often say the only thing that hasn't touched a truck is a baby, but everything that baby wears is touch to truck, right? So, understanding where the supply chain can really improve the results your service or product gets for customers. So I look at it like this, and some people, actually call me a fanatic. I have quite a few people that I speak to, and we can get into a 4-hour conversation that goes like that on supply chain. But look, I tend to share with people to look at it like this. If you have a product that can help somebody achieve a specific goal, achieve a desire, achieve an outcome they're looking for,
solve a problem.
Is, 100%. It could be a pair of shoes so they feel better, look better, sell better. It could be a jacket so they feel better, look better, sell better. It could be a bike so they can get around. It could be a car so they can get that dream car, that first car, right? I always looked at the supply chain as I am a strategic partner in helping you achieve that goal you've always wanted. And let me expand on that for a bit. So when I was in brokerage, a big company I worked with was Quartz Stone, right? And we're talking just big 8-foot by 6-foot slabs of stone that are made into the most beautiful kitchens, bathrooms, countertops on the planet. So I didn't look at my business as I'm delivering stone. I looked at it as I'm fulfilling your dream because you've been saving for a year to put that $15,000 countertop in your kitchen. So I'm your dream facilitator. That's the way I look at the supply chain globally.
And that's what I'm suggesting that our listeners do, is that they expand their concept of where they are 100%. In the supply chain, from conception to manufacturing to
100%.
Transportation to delivery to use, and just take a look at what added value you might be able to give to people on either side of where you are in the continuum. And I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but we're all spitballing right now, attempting to find out what is on the other side of this tunnel. And yes, there's light, but it's blurry. So, I just got a kick out of thinking about this supply chain conversation. So thank you for adding to it.
No problem. You know, so for all of your listeners, here's what I would share with you. Whatever you sell, there's a bigger purpose to it. There's a bigger opportunity to it than what you sell. Because it's not about what you sell, right? If you grow bananas, you're not selling bananas. You're selling the nourishment and the joy people get out of eating the banana. Now, some of you might laugh at that, and that's fine. But if you take your business to that level of joy, energy, excitement, and enthusiasm and sell that to people, if I were to call you up, Ike, and you were a banana purchaser and somebody says, hey, I got a lot of bananas for you. And I say, you know what? I have the most exquisite bananas. I mean, the taste, it actually makes you salivate when you eat this banana. It's not like the other Dole bananas. These bananas are exceptional. We focus on, exactly, we focus on the texture, we focus on the taste, we focus on the pleasure our mouth gets. And, for all of your customers that are looking to have a wiser decision at breakfast instead of the McDonald's sandwich, these bananas, I mean, when they are at that crisp, ripe age where they're just wonderful, they don't brown as quick, they stay longer, they're beautiful because of the way we raise them. That's a better sell than, hey, I got a truckload of bananas, right? And we can do this with everything. If you're in construction and you're selling construction equipment, you're facilitating that person to buy their first brand new home,
Yeah.
or to buy their first brand new condo, or to go from that condo to a home or from a smaller home to a bigger home. So you're expanding on their dreams.
And integrity, though, is such a major portion of that, because your truckload of bananas had best be that good, or you'll make that sale once.
Yes, I mean, and I apologize. I always operate under the assumption that, whoever's listening to your podcast, as I do with my podcast as well, is like, you're a pro. You're listening to this because you want the education, you want to grow. So you have integrity. You're not that, quote unquote snake oil salesman.
Well, we're reminding them, and that's
Yes,
what's
100%,
important,
yes,
that you have to
yep.
be able to deliver. Dan delivers. People know him reputation-wise, so he can say, look, I got a truckload of bananas that are going to make you die. Actually, though, you'll live. But if you, as a young salesperson, or even as an older salesperson, are using hyperbole to sell, be careful, because as Dan mentioned, that is what, quote, snake oil salesmen are known for, is here, try this.
You give us
what have you got to lose? I'm not going there.
No, but I mean, but here's the flip side to that. All of those salespeople give us a bad name. So right now, if you look at it, I have training programs, I have online courses, I do C-level training, I do a lot of training inside transportation companies. When I call that transportation company up, I'm as passionate. When I call that brokerage company up, when I call anybody in the logistics field up, I am so passionate, and I know without a doubt everything I do can change their business in ways they never even thought possible. And I'm talking about positive change. If they just interacted with a salesperson that will say anything to make the sale, I kind of sound like that salesperson, right? When it comes to being relentless and just, continuing. So those salespeople actually give the pros a bad name. Now, the beautiful thing about COVID, the beautiful thing about the economy crash in 2008 and 2009, the beautiful thing about all these things that happen every 10 years is the pros survive, the amateurs lose. That's my belief about this, is if you are in sales right now and you are a pro and you operate with integrity, you take your reputation as paramount, right? Image, credibility, brand. Remember those 3 words, everyone. If you focus on your image, your credibility, and your brand, your customer's image, credibility, and brand before yours, their credibility in their company, the personal brand that they have in their company, and their image. When you say you're going to deliver, your customer is going back to their boss saying they're going to deliver.
Right.
When you don't, you hinder their image, credibility, and brand. If you keep their image, credibility, and brand paramount, yours becomes paramount as well. You're going to survive this.
If you solve their problem, that really is the key. And if the, maintaining
100%.
brand is their problem, you address that up front and go, a lot of people are concerned that their brand is going to be damaged. What might we be able to do for you that'll help you sustain your brand? And
you look at Nike, perfect example, right? Nike is probably one of the most recognized brands on the planet, and then probably Apple's a close second. But you look at Nike. They were the first company to close their doors. They shut every one of their stores down first, or one of the first. I don't know if they were exactly the first. Yesterday, the CEO of Nike released one of the most awesome videos I've watched in a long time about what they're going to do to keep their staff and everyone in their stores safe from this, right? So be that leader. Right? Like they focused on the brand. You look at the amount of money, Ike, that is spent on brands, like not products, brands.
Yeah.
But you look at Michael Jordan, for example, this whole Last Dance on Netflix has been the craze. It's like #1 in Canada for, the last 2 months running on Netflix. And you look at his brand, right? He hasn't been in basketball since 98? I think he finally retired or something.
Long time.
And he's still making hundreds of millions of dollars a year on Air Jordans. They're still the #1 basketball shoe. The stats are stupid. Like 75% of the players in basketball and kids are still wearing Air Jordans. Like, this is crazy, but that's a brand, right? That brand came with quality. It came with being the best on the planet. It came with integrity. It came with passion. It came with dedication. That was the brand. Image, credibility, brand.
It also comes with a fantasy that has the wearer living in their present state, imagining their life in the desired state. The fantasy that comes not so much in the wearing, but of the purchase and the imagination. And if we as salespeople are capable of helping our prospects create that fantasy by asking them, well, how would you like this to be? And how will that be of benefit? And what's not having that costing you? You'll start to get information from them where they go inside and they start telling you things that they won't normally tell a salesperson, that, none of your business will be changed with this idea of, wow, can you help me with that? And if you're a good communicator, excuse me, if you're a good communicator, a powerful, effective communicator, you can uncover that and then sell to their desires. And you hear people say, well, find their pain. It's not always pain. Sometimes it's a desire to be even more effective or have more fun or be better at something. That's not a pain situation. No. That's really something where fantasy takes over of, wow, I'm going to be better at this, or I'm going to be able to deliver so much more quickly. So that's...
I've had so many sales conversations. I've called so many prospects. And after I've asked, what's your primary and secondary reason for adding or switching a service pattern, and they give me an answer, I clarify that answer, and then I go into what I call qualifying statements. And I say, Mr. Prospect, my focus is on your image, credibility, and brand. And here's why. Because I know when you make the visual decision to choose me as a supplier, so all of you in sales out there, when your customers make a decision to choose to buy your product, to choose to use you, your service, whatever it is, they're making a visual decision in their community, which is their office, their business, their company, right? And I say, that visual decision is paramount to enhance. I don't just want to maintain. I want to build your image, credibility, and brand in the company. I often refer to it as, you're sitting around with a bunch of buddies and it's, 2:00 in the morning and you're on a Friday night and an infomercial comes on, right? And this infomercial is selling a widget of some kind. And in your head, you're going, damn, that's pretty cool. I could probably use that.
I want it.
You want it, right? Now, you're sitting by yourself. You're going to pull out your credit card. You're going to buy it. If you're sitting with a bunch of buddies and you're in your head, you're going, man, I'd love that. And your buddy goes, oh my God, that's a horrible, anybody who buys that's an idiot. You're probably not going to pull your credit card out and purchase it on the spot. You're going to have second thoughts, right? So these are the thoughts, I believe, that our prospects have when we are in the sales process is, what if I purchase services from Dan? And I tell my present supplier, right, and in logistics, it's, if I take your product, Ike, and you're using ABC Guide to get your product there, and hey, there's no real problems. There's some things that you'd like to see work better, maybe oil and grease a few joints here and there. But all in all, it's not killing you. You're not, your job's not in jeopardy. And then I come in. And I mess A up, I mess B up, and then I screw C up. You've now told your incumbent that you work with, okay, I'm going somewhere else. So you have the possibility of tarnishing that relationship. So when they come back there, they're going to be more expensive. They're not going to do the job right, or they're going to, all this kind of things that go through our head as humans.
Aggression.
Yeah, and then we mess up, meaning Dan messes up. That's big. So why not have the conversation and start, G.I. Joe said it best. When I was a kid, I used to run home from school to watch G.I. Joe. Knowing is half the battle. So if you can eliminate that, or you can add to that knowing that the customer, you say, I focus on image, credibility, and brand. Your image in your company, how long you been there, Mr. Prospect? I've been here 10 years. You've spent 10 years building your image, your credibility when you go to your bosses and say, I think we should do this, and your personal brand inside that company. If your company spends billions on their brand, you're in the hundreds of millions on your personal brand, just in your effort, energy to build it, right? And I don't think very many salespeople focus on that. They focus on, here's what I want to do, here's the commission I'm going to get, and let's go.
This is why I tell people that the traditional way to sell works, because the people out there that are pros who use the traditional presentation, question, close guidelines that have been handed down for all these years, it really works. A lot of people get frustrated with that because it doesn't feel comfortable. That's the part that I address. How to do it in a little different way where you get to get rid of some of this performance anxiety unless you're a real pro. And in keeping with that as a teaching moment, one of the things you said in terms of telling them about what will happen positively if they make the move, I would invite anyone listening in that situation just to experiment with, describe for me the perfect scenario that would come with you making a move. Because then if they are willing to play, then the information you give them can be based on what they've told you rather than what you want to tell them. So that's my only input here, that when you ask a question like that, you're avoiding, because you may find out that the person that you're talking to, their boat doesn't float with what you've mentioned. If you're practiced and you know your prospects and you know your clients, you can do that. But when you're just starting out, it's always better to ask. Ask and ye shall receive. It's almost a promise. Another very important question. Tell us about your podcast.
Okay. Well, you know what? If I can address one thing before we get to that, because I think this will add tremendous value, this banter that you
that's
and I are
what we're doing.
Forth, because I want to play here for a second.
Talk more.
Let's talk about performance anxiety. Talk about anxiety in general. It's a fear of the unknown. Performance anxiety, and let's go back and forth on this, like, because this now we're getting down and dirty here. Performance and anxiety comes from the unknown. If you operate in the sense of where you take objections, rebuttals, and you take a week, it will take you no longer than a week to make a sales call. If you strategically set up 3 paramount questions, 3 landmark questions, and you start realizing the answers to them, all of your anxiety disappears. Because when you pick up the phone, you say, I'm going to ask this question, and they're going to give me one of these 3 answers or one of these 4 answers. You know what I did? I got all my answers to those 4 answers. So you know what? Bring it on. Let's go. It's like going to the gym for the first time. Most people get anxiety because they don't know what to do. They've been there 3 months. They're doing their routine. They have a routine, a 5-day split or whatever their routine is. Then they go in with confidence, right? It's that confidence competence loop that we continually use. And it's like a tree, right? The ring just grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And by doing that, you eliminate that anxiety. And this is a part of being a sales pro. And again, we'll distinguish between the amateur pro, where a pro goes, yeah, you know what? I got to make that presentation. I got to make it on these 4 things that are key to them. Why? Because I've asked the questions. So when I go in to give the presentation, it's the next logical step, from our conversation. And I look at sales as a baseball diamond. Your first base is qualify. Your second base is find out why they buy. Why do they purchase whatever they're purchasing? When you hit third base, your only job is to fulfill that why. Once you do that, the next logical step is the home run, which is the sale.
They get to go home. Comedian George
Get
Carlin, baseball. You get to go home.
Yeah.
So now tell us about your podcast.
Okay. So I run a high performance logistics sales podcast, and it's morphed over the last little bit because I actually bring gentlemen like yourself, pros like yourself, and we pretty much have a conversation just like we're having right here. I ask for tips, I ask for strategies, I ask for tactics, I ask for, technical tools, I ask for downloads, I ask for all sorts of stuff from my guests to really roll out a new vision of sales, right? Like a sales 103, if you will. And I ask these things and I interview people both in the transportation and logistics world, like yourself in the training world. I'm a sales trainer, as you are. I have courses. I bring in what people would consider competitors. You know, Dan, why do you bring in competitors? Because they're going to have some ideas that I don't have.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not about me. It's about you, the listener. And you, the listener, are going to glean some awesome stuff from that. That podcast has now transitioned into a weekly coaching show that Nick Redstone and I put on called the NRDD, No Risk Double Down Coaching Show. Because now what we're looking at when it comes to this post-COVID, you have to have a no risk attitude, and you need to double down on what's working. So, you know, when I say no risk, I look at things like, you know, there's no risk in asking that blunt question, right? Because if I don't ask, I'm not going to get the answer. And you and I can work for 6 months down the road before I realize you're only about price. And the next guy that just happens to make a phone call and is $10 cheaper than me, I'm going to lose 6 months of invested time, energy, and effort into our relationship to lose you, only to have to go back in and erode my margins even more, because now we're playing that price game. Because what's going to happen is 2 weeks after we stop doing business, I'm going to realize the business is gone. Somebody else has got it. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to drop it another $10. We've just now eroded $20 off the margin. The only person that's winning is the customer. But at what point does the customer lose? Because then if I'm down, you know, say my margin's $100, I'm down 20% on my margins. There's only a matter of time before my company comes back and says, hey, listen, I get it. The customer wants a deal, but everyone's got to be profitable. You know, I think a big thing with this COVID, and when we come out of this COVID, your cost plus scenario, I think, is going to be one of the most ultimate sales you can ever work with, where you identify and you establish a good margin for everybody to be happy. And like you said, all the rules are laid up front. You know, if we're playing Monopoly and I want to collect $1,000 every time I pass go and you collect $100, it's only a matter of time before I've bought everything on the board. And there's no way you can catch up, right?
Rules must be equitable.
100%. It's got to be a two-way street. You work with a customer that's all one-way streets, run, man, and run fast. I don't care if you got to be Usain Bolt.
Yeah.
You do what you got to do. You get out of there. So these are, you know, for me, the way I see this, the future of this happening is, okay, you know what, let's have a transparent relationship. Let's understand that these are the key metrics that I need to do in order to keep your business flowing. This is what it costs from an employment perspective. Like if you have to have a team or you have backup, IT, whatever, you know, so in order to do that, I need a 15% margin. Now, you might have customers come in at 10%. But it's not sustainable over the long term. So what do you, Mr. Prospect, want, or Mr. Customer, want coming out of post-COVID? Do you want to establish a business over the long term? Or do you want to just do an ebb and flow transactional business? Because if you want to do a transactional business, you know, some of you pro sales people out there might be like, yeah, I'll do a transactional business. But at what point does transactional really add value to your life?
Well, you end up almost as a matcher then, as we discussed in starting out. You're giving them something with the hopes that they'll reciprocate, which they very rarely do. And 100%. They reciprocate by asking for another $10.
Or a reduction in $10. Yeah.
You know, again, setting up the guidelines. I famously go, you know, when they say, well, I can get it less from your competitors. And I always say, you know, to be candid with you, my competitors should charge less. And that is, you know, either that or saying, you know, we are not the least expensive. And based on that, I'm curious, how do you think we have thrived like we do, charging more than our competitors? Mm-hmm. And they go, well, because when they say it, it's true. When you say it, it's selling.
Yeah.
So,
you know, I deal with a company. So in 2018, there was a huge capacity crunch. Something called ELDs came out, electronic logging devices. So a professional transportation driver, a truck driver, prior to 2018, December 16th, 2018, 2018, they did paper logs. So a lot of times what they do is a lot of drivers, in order to skim and add more hours to their day, because they get paid by the mile. So if they're in traffic for 3 hours, they want to make that up because they need, they need X amount of revenue to go home with. They would keep 3 and 4 logbooks. And depending on which, we call them chicken coops, which station or notification station they'd hit, they'd pull out a different logbook. Now with the electronic logging devices, it's almost impossible to cheat the system, right? So what happened was it created a massive crunch in the industry, because now trucks that would normally run 17 hours can only run 11, right? So in our industry, you're losing 6-7 hours of productivity per day per truck at, a $4 trillion industry of, cross-border freight in North America. That's a lot. Like when this happened, companies like Walmart needed 10,000 new trucks just to complete their supply chain overnight, right? So
the scale is just a real challenge to get. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when the industry itself is just astronomical in the amount of money annually that goes through it. So what happened was it became what we called a capacity crunch. So for example, states like Texas, right? Dallas had a 7-8 to 1 ratio, meaning there was 7 to 8 loads that could be picked up for every one truck. So it put the trucking companies in the position of power, right? Right now it's a shipper's market, meaning there's 10 trucks and there's 5 loads. So now what's happening is prices are dropping, right? It's a shipper's market. This was a carrier's market. The people that actually made out in 2019 and are still doing really good during this COVID were companies that went back to their customers in the middle of this crunch when prices were going up 30, 40, 50, 60%. I mean, loads out of California alone to Canada went from, that $5,000-$6,000 mark to $10,000-$12,000. Like, so you got to think, if you're purchasing product in California and you have X margin, if you're dealing with like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something like this up in Canada, and you're purchasing it at 22 cents and you're selling it at 29 cents a unit, right? And you've got that kind of 7 points in it, 7 cents per unit, and your cost of transportation doubles, you're now down to 3 cents per unit.
Yeah.
That you're actually making profit. Nobody can live on 3%. The companies that went back to their customers said, you know what, I want to partner with you. I really want to become an extension of your business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock your pricing in now. We're going to show you how costs have drastically gone up for the rest of the year. And even at that point in 2018, we thought it was going to be kind of like a 3-4 year trend of costs going up. Those companies are doing fantastic right now.
There's what I was talking about, supply chain collaboration, where you look at the problems of spot contracts of going, well, I have this and I need to ship it, versus having a relationship with somebody who specifically gets that you have a challenge in your supply chain, and someone who is become an allied tradesman to you saying, look, we're in this together. Let's see how we can work this out so we can all profit. And I get that conversation is lacking in a lot of sales conversations, because people, human beings, are out there trying to feed their family. So they're sell without
they're feeding
really
their families
saying,
on a transactional relationship instead of a long-term partnership, which everyone in sales, that's especially, commission sales,
that's the tip for today.
I don't care. 100%. It's not about transactional. Any transactional business you have right now, I would suggest you immediately go back, you analyze the business, and you figure out, how can I go back to this customer and make this transactional account a long-term, substantial baseline account, right? Let's look at it from a foundation perspective.
So you think this supply chain conversation has at least some legs?
Well, I mean, yeah, 1,000%. I mean, so listen, when it comes to supply chain or anything, it's about foundation, right? You can't build a skyscraper unless you go, I think it's 3/4 or the full length of the skyscraper underground.
Yeah.
The bigger the foundation, the bigger the building you can put on. So if you have transactional business, I don't care what it is you sell. I don't care if you're in supply chain, software development. I don't really care. I don't care if you sell pens. If you're a transactional business and you don't have the smoothest, most comfortable pen that writes, then in your transactional, you have no foundation of your business. You really don't, because somebody who comes in that's a better transactional salesperson, or somebody that comes in and shares with your customer the benefits of long-term established relationships,
Right.
you will lose the business.
Right.
And that is, you want to talk, Ike, you said one thing you said was feed your family. I get it. But if you're transactional, you're living month to month.
Yeah.
You're not really feeding your family long-term. You're not.
Whose problem are you trying to solve?
100%.
Yeah.
And
if you solve your prospects'
problems,
if you solve your prospects' problems, what happens to yours? And that's really one of the battle cries behind the easier way to sell, is that if you can be a problem solver and help people move from where they are to where they want to be, your scoreboard will show it, because as a giver and as someone who truly believes in making things happen for other people because you have that skill, that you get compensated for that anyway. So if you go in for the compensation, it just makes it even more difficult, because that's when your prospects can see that coming from about 2 miles away if you're there for you instead of them. So
100% commission.
And everything that you said fits into that. And I do want to point out, because people have heard me now for nearly 40 episodes talking about the traditional way to sell works. And it's important that in this conversation, you see how it can work and you see how it can be really effective. So if you're doing it as a way of being and selling, keep doing it if you're successful. If you're looking for an easier way,
Yeah. Well, you look at it, you say the traditional way, meaning the foundational way.
I'm saying with a presentation where you give a presentation, you handle objections.
Even above that, Ike, that, we go, 100%. We go back to something Zig Ziglar said 50 years ago. You help enough people get what they want, you're going to get what you want.
Correct.
All of this foundation, I mean, your business is built on it, is going to be solid 100 years from now, because we're still dealing with people, right? This is the big thing, is we're still dealing with people. No matter what changes, the technology, the delivery, the blah, blah, blah. I don't really care. We're dealing with people. People buy from emotion. They buy for certain reasons. And a lot of the times it's not the product, it's what the product does. So
that's what it is. It's that fantasy I was talking about before. Yeah. And imagine if a shift in communication, a slight shift, things that you already know, would cause your prospect very much. I watched the Star Wars #9, I forget what the Rise of Skywalker. And in that, it's the first time since the #4, the New Hope, where Obi-Wan Kenobi goes, you don't need to see their papers. These aren't the droids you're looking for. And the character in this movie did the same thing. And I always look at a communication with the prospect. If you ask them the right question, they respond like, these aren't the droids we're looking for, because they're inside thinking about what they need to have their problem solved. And if you're there sitting and going, I can do that for you, they'll end up closing themselves. And I got into that because of the presentation and objection thing, which I found to be terribly frustrating. So I said, I'm just going to get rid of it. And that's how goofy mine is. I just got rid of all of those things. So it's, everybody's working as a pro, trying to make whatever they're doing working. And you are a perfect example of making things work. And I really want to thank you for taking time out of our free time. And that's another thing, that the people that we deal with, all of the pros that we talk to on LinkedIn and in our other conversations, they're making use of this time. They're not sitting there going, oh, nuts, I can't wait for things to start up. They're being cause in the matter. They're causing business, if not to be transacting today, to set up their pipeline. And I'm inviting all of you, and I know Dan will too, to look at what you can do to prepare yourself so that when somebody shoots off the starting gun, you're not going, oh, am I supposed to go now? And
you know, Ike, it's perfect. Segue's perfect, and I apologize for cutting you off there.
No, that's fine.
Here's the thing. Any salesperson that's listening to this, just understand, we control how fast the economy comes back. The more we sell, whether you're selling B2C, you know, whether you're selling to people, whether you're selling to companies, I don't care what you're selling. The faster the sales world jumps off of the line post-COVID, the faster the economy gets back. Everything we do begins with sales.
Nothing happens until something gets sold. Dan Deigan,
perfect way to end.
Thank you for taking this time. I know I said that before, but I meant it, so I'm saying it again.
No, I appreciate it. I hope I added some value to your listeners. I hope you know, it was to me it was awesome. I appreciated it very much.
It was good, and maybe we'll do it again and cause even more trouble. Plus, I have a confession to make before we say goodbye. Here I am, this communications expert, telling people you must be a good questioner and a good listener. And I listened to our conversation, and you asked me a question, and I didn't listen. You asked me about how long would it take for someone who's learning my stuff to learn it. And I went off and started talking about the magnificence of the system rather than answering your question. So I wanted to say 12 weeks. Goodbye, Dan.
Thank you, Ike. Take care of yourself, and to all your listeners, take care.
There, I'm better now. You made me laugh and golf. Take care, my friend.
Take care, Ike.
Stay healthy.
You too.
All right, that is going to do it for this episode. Please think back to the conversation we had about ditching your pitch. Remember to read the articles that I provided for you with links in the show notes. And also, make sure that you listen to the entire conversation with Dan. He talks about little tidbits that are so valuable when you're either working in someone else's business or you're operating your own. We don't talk about cost and markups a lot, but that's a really important thing to know if you're in sales and you want to be successful. Know your industry. This is Ike Krieger. See you next time.